Hey, everybody. This is Jason Tondro, and it's been a while, but we are back for the next and one of the last episodes in our ongoing Starfinder Developer Diary, talking about the evolution of the Fly Free or Die adventure path. I was the lead developer on this adventure path, and the last couple of volumes came out about a month or two ago. It's taken me a while to get back to this, not because I haven't wanted to, but because I've been writing my ass off. So I have become a senior developer now at Paizo, and Fly Free or Die is to some degree responsible for that. Fly Free or Die has done very well. It has sold better than we expected it to sell, or that we needed it to sell to hit our budget. It is what in the business department we call overperforming. And that's very gratifying. And I really think that these developer diaries and my ability to interact with you guys, the fans, the players, the GMs, has really helped. I think it's helped build buzz for the AP a little bit over the last 6 months as it came out. And I think it's built a positive reputation for the thing. And if any of you, any of you are GMs and players, and you wanted to know how to run it, or you wanted to know any of the interesting background behind the curtain, you could always come here and watch these videos, and hundreds of you have done that. So Fly Free or Die has done well. And we had an opportunity to kind of, there was a need on the Pathfinder side. They needed another hand. They needed a person who would be willing to go back and forth between Pathfinder and Starfinder, kind of working on both games. Well, that's not easy. I mean, when you are deep in a game system like this, you think Starfinder 24/7. As Owen Stevens, wonderful old friend and mentor, used to tell me, he would wake up in the morning thinking about Starfinder, and he would go to bed at night thinking about Starfinder. And so working on both games, Starfinder and Pathfinder 2nd Edition, simultaneously, it requires more of you. You have to switch back and forth between the two games, and that knowing two different game systems does not sound that hard, but that's actually the smallest part of it. What it's really about is learning things like formatting and editing. How do we, especially when the two games are similar but different. So, for example, actions in Pathfinder 2 are always capitalized. If a creature has a power or an ability like charge, every time that you refer to that power, you always capitalize it. Well, that's not true in Starfinder, right? I mean, it might be titled capital C charge when you find it in the stat block, but when you use it in the body text, it's not. And I know this sounds like really tiny, fine details. Like, who cares about that? But the answer is we do. we care. We care about it. And we have presenting a complex rule system depends on consistency and being able to visually recognize how these things work. And you learn a lot. The game is easier for you to learn if we present it in a particular way. And Starfighter and Pathfinder 2nd Edition have different rules for how things are presented and how they're edited. And so not a lot of people were too keen on taking over that job, somebody who would work back and forth on both game systems. And I was like, I'll do it on a couple of conditions. I was like, okay, I want to be able to still pitch my own original ideas. I mean, that's what was fun about Fly Free or Die, right? Was coming up with my own idea and pitching it and outlining it. And if you have watched these videos, we walked together through all of that shit, hiring freelancers and really having a lot of creative control over the final outcome of the product. And I still wanted to be doing that. I didn't want to just be like that add-on extra guy who's like, okay, well, we need 20 pages of this new Pathfinder book to be developed. And so, let's give it to Tondro. And I'm like, now, this is not to say that we aren't all hands on deck sometimes. Like if a book is late and somebody has capacity and I'm like, for sure. Like if I'm helping out Ron or I'm helping out Patrick or Jacobs or somebody and, they need somebody to take 20 pages. Hell yeah. I am happy to do that. Happy to do it. But I don't want that to just be all I'm doing, right? And I wanted to be part of the meetings, like when all the other Pathfinder developers get together to brainstorm stuff. I wanted to be in the room. I don't want to just be the guy. What I was worried about, the half elf problem, right? If for those of you that know about, like, if you're old time fantasy gamers, you know that half elves are often portrayed as a particular species ancestry, which is neither elf nor human. That the humans don't like him because they're half elvish, and the elves don't like him because they're half human. And I really wanted to avoid that. I wanted to avoid a situation where I would be like, the Starfinder team would think I was a Pathfinder guy, and the Pathfinder team would think I was a Starfinder guy, and I wouldn't really be welcome on either team. And I really wanted to avoid that. And everyone was totally down with that. Like they're like, yeah, we want you to just keep doing what you're doing. And I'm like, I'm in. Okay. So, and part of that, the reason why I could do that is because I have written 3 Pathfinder 2nd edition adventure path volumes, 1 a year for the last 3 years. And I've contributed to hardbacks and stuff like that. So, and this is all a very long way of explaining why I'm so late getting back to this damn series. It's not that I don't like to do it, because I love to do it. But I have been writing my ass off. I had another Pathfinder 2 adventure path volume to write. It's probably about to be announced as you are watching this. I'm recording this 2 days before Gen Con starts. So when at Gen Con 2021, we'll probably announce it. So I'm not gonna steal Eric's thunder. But I wrote a volume for that. And it's actually not quite done yet. It's due in a couple of weeks. But I wanted to get this recorded before Gen Con so that we'd have something to talk about at Gen Con. Okay, so quick recap. For those of you that are coming in, we're doing a series examining every volume of Fly Fear Die, and also the pre-work and the after-work. So it's an 8-book series that turned into a 9-part series when we got the folks from Southern Tomfoolery to come on an episode or 2 ago and talk about how they're live playing Fly Fear Die. And for those of you that are looking for a good example of how this adventure path plays out, maybe you want to hear how other people GM it so that you can decide, well, I like that, I don't like that, and I want to mix it up and change it, or I want to steal that bit or that bit of dialogue or whatever. I encourage you to check out Southern Tomfoolery. They have got about 20 episodes or so lined up for you already. So check it out, and you can hear them play this adventure path live. And they keep pretty strict to the rules. Of course, they change stuff, and that's good. Like, I don't want anybody to think that you can't change this adventure. Like, I live for that. Like, I have never run an adventure straight out of the book. Never. Even ones I have written, I have not. When I run them later, I don't run them straight out of the book. And I expect you to all change these things to suit your table. There is nothing in this book that is holy writ. All right. So let's talk about the unique challenges of this particular volume, because it's in many ways the hardest book to write. And it's my personal favorite amongst the entire AP. Chris Wasko was my author on this. Chris wrote some society adventures, but this was his first AP volume. He did a great job on it. And he, especially because, like everybody in this AP, like one recurring theme that you will have heard a lot is that I gave my writers really hard assignments. Sometimes it's a lot easier to outline a problem than it is to solve it. And Kendra and Jessica and Leo and BJ all had this. I make these fastball pitches, and I'm like, okay, I guess you better solve this problem for me, and they do. And it's really fascinating to see how they do it, and I learn a lot. The problem in this particular volume is that it's the volume in which the players lose all their money. Now let's rewind a little bit. If you remember, the overarching pitch for this AP has always been rags to riches to ruin to revenge. In other words, it's not just an accelerated line. You're not just getting better and better as the AP goes on. You're not just getting more powerful and richer and more influential. It's actually one of these. You get, let me see, how can I do this? Here we go. You start off way down here and you get rich. You start off with nothing. Then you get moderately successful, right? We're hitting like volume 2, volume 3. Then you lose everything and then you go and get it all back. So it's this kind of like zip, zop, zip line. Well, this is the volume in which the ruin part hits you. And there was pushback on this. Everybody understood it was going to be hard because, to quote what I was told more than once, players don't like to lose their cool toys. Well, you're right. They don't. My original inspiration on this and the way that I felt that it could be done is from A4, the old Slave Lords adventure back in D&D first edition. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I don't remember what the adventure was called. A4, something of the Slave Lords. Escape the Slave Lords? I don't remember. But I'll tell you what I do remember, that you started that adventure in a sandy cave with nothing. You had like your underwear on and a broken dagger that you find in the sand. Like you had nothing. And I remember reading that and I'm like, how do I do anything? Like what do I do? How do I even be a hero? How do I play this game when I don't have my armor, my weapons, my magic items, my spell book, my magic thingamabobs, my hydro spanner, whatever? How do I even play this game without my stuff? And to this day, I'm not really sure how you're supposed to make it through that adventure when you start the game off with nothing but a broken knife. But I loved the audacity of it. I loved the fact that an adventure was willing to start you off this way and make you struggle. So I felt like it had been done, that there was a long tradition of doing it. And so I wanted to do it too. And I wanted to do it well. I wanted to make it fun. Part of that, to me, has been telegraphing the ruin so that the players all know what's going to happen. Now, that sounds kind of counterintuitive. Like, shouldn't the players always be in suspense? Like, don't you want to surprise them with everything? But I kind of have come to believe in a situation like this, where you are taking away all of the PC's stuff, where you are going to take away their ship and you're going to take away all their money and you're going to leave them stranded on a space station with nothing but their friends and favors that are owed. If you're going to do that, you need buy-in. To avoid player frustration, you need buy-in. If you remember in the last volume, we set it up where the players basically do the one big heist, super heist job, and they become rich beyond their wildest dreams. And they're fantastically wealthy. We don't quantify exactly how rich they are. We don't tell them how many credits are on the treasure barge that they've just stolen. But we make clear that it's a whole hell of a lot. Like, it's a lot more than the credits you're supposed to have according to your level in the Starfinder core rulebook, right? Okay, so you've got all this money. Well, you can't keep it because if you spend it, you'll just buy level 20 weapons and armor for yourself, and then the rest of the adventure path is a cakewalk. And we can't just give the bad guys that too, because it doesn't work like that. Yes, you buy level 20 weapons and armor. And then we give all the bad guys level 20 weapons and armor. And then none of you can hit each other. And if you do roll a 20, you instantly kill the other person because your weapon does so much damage. Like, the game system is not designed for that. It breaks the game. So you can't keep that money, or at least you can't spend it. So the premise of this adventure and the way that it starts is, let's give everybody a chance to really feel like they're super rich for like one scene. And we do this with a bunch of flashbacks early in the adventure where, like, okay, you've all been off spending your money however you want. You've been doing your own thing individually. This is like the classic walk-off scene from the heist, right? Like the heist has taken place. It's Ocean's 11. They're all standing outside the hotel casino watching the fountains, and one by one, they all walk away. That's what you did at the end of Volume 4. So now where have you been? And you all come back together at the beginning of Volume 5, and you had this chance to kind of share all of the cool shit you've been doing. And maybe you went big game hunting on Castrovel, or you sponsored biomedical research to cure cancer, or you just partied for a month, or you started your own business, or whatever. Like you went to the Met Gala or whatever. And we built in a couple of, and Chris thought of how to do all this. Like we sort of talked loosely about it, but then he came up with all the details where each one of these things that you could do would give you some kind of long-term benefit. I mean, it might be minor, like, okay, you get a piece of gear. You get like this, you went safari hunting on Castrovel and you bought this, dino rifle or whatever. And now you still have it. You had that gun, or you earned the goodwill of this biomedical research corp. And so you get this like bio augmentation or something that they installed on you, or whatever. Maybe it's a bonus to die rolls, or maybe it's some other kind of non-physical benefit that your character has to represent this time that you spent off camera, basically living the life that your character dreams of, whatever that is. And then you all come back together again, and everything is taken away. The bad guys hack your tax accounts. They hack your bank accounts. They take all of your money. They steal your starship. You get jumped by a bunch of mercenaries. And now you are trapped on Absalom Station. This is the cover. You can see it here. It came out pretty great. That's Rosora here in the white. Aline Rosora, one of the two big villains of the campaign. This game, this adventure has this campaign, this adventure path has two big villains. And so we always knew that you'd be tackling one of them in Volume 5 and the other one in Volume 6. And one of the challenges we faced when coming up with this is how to make those feel different. In other words, if you're just tracking down the villain and killing them in both books 5 and book 6, well, that feels kind of repetitive, doesn't it? Like, couldn't we come up with something more interesting? And so we spent a lot of time thinking about how which one of these should be the hunt and kill adventure, and which one of them should be something different. And the answer was neither, and they're both different. And we'll get to those when we get to details on kind of how this adventure plays out. But it starts off with this wonderful scene, which like I wanted to do like the iconic heroes in a Corona commercial, right? Like, this is it. You've done it. You've been living your life, the life of your dreams. You're sipping alien cocktails on a planet with 2 moons, and enjoying your well-earned vacation when the bad guy mercenaries arrive and crash your party, and everything goes to shit. The middle part of this book, and I'm the part 2 of this adventure is what we call Down and Out on Absalom Station, and this kind of a sandboxy situation where your characters are on Absalom Station. You can't leave because you don't have a starship. You have your stuff. You still have your weapons, your armor, your other personal gear, but you've lost all of the money, and you don't have your starship, and anything that was on the starship is also gone. So what do? You have a goal. Like, if you can figure out where the starship is, and if you can get a starship, then you can go steal your ship back, which is the goal, right? Okay. So we put a bunch of plot threads on Absalom Station. You can, we have a recurring character. Rat Rod comes back. Those of you who are long-term Society players will recognize Rat Rod. He appears in one of the very first, in fact, I think he might be in the first Society adventure, where you race him in a junk racer competition. But here, Rat Rod has now returned. He's now made it big. He's got his own junk racer track, and he might have a ship. He's got a lead on a ship, and so you travel to the Rat Rod's track, and you help him kind of repair the track and stuff. And he tells you about the bug, the rust bug. This ship turned out so much cooler than I was afraid it was going to look. Like I was afraid it was going to look just like the dorkiest, stupidest looking starship ever. But it came out looking great. It's got some great character to it. It is a rust bug. It is a beat up, old, junky looking starship that's been maintained by goblins and Isoki over the years. And this is the ship you end up with, and you inherit. You get this ship, and you have to kind of get it working. And throughout the AP, what you do is you do favors for people, and you get pieces of starship equipment that you can bolt onto the rust bug to make it a little bit less sucky, right? Also, as one player noted when they were looking through the volumes, this is where a lot of the long-term subplots of Fly Fear Die pay off. A lot of the characters that you helped or chose not to help over the course of the AP come back on Absalom Station. They find out that your name has been blacklisted over like the entire Pact Worlds and everywhere else. Nobody will do any business with you. They won't give you jobs. They won't buy or sell to you. They won't do anything for you. You've been locked out of both the legitimate Starfinder economy. You've been locked out by the company, by Edge Corp, who has put up have blacklisted you, and then your underworld enemies, Sinjin, have blacklisted you on the black market. So you cannot do either legal or illegal purchases. Nobody will help you. But the people that you have been helping for the course of this AP show up in we didn't have room to really get into it. So it's mostly just like a big long bullet list of potential characters who might come back. And I encourage the GM to take those one little moments, like it's literally like a bullet point and a sentence, and they give you some piece of gear or something, or they give you a starship component. Opportunities for you to turn those into full-fledged role-playing scenes where the players feel like all of that stuff that they had to go through early in the AP, where they were helping people out for nothing. Jobs went bad. They never got paid. They were asked to help somebody basically just because we need help and you can do it, right? You'll help us, won't you? And a lot of player characters are probably like, well, what's in it for us? Like, we don't really see any reason to do it. And then the character on their team whose compass points true north was like, yeah, we have to help them because we can and we should. And so you help them, and somebody grumbles about it, like, well, where's the credits, man? If we're not getting paid. Well, here's where it all kind of comes back around, right? Where the good stuff that you did for all these NPCs, these non-player characters, early in the adventure path over the course of the last 4 volumes, they show up and they say, hey, you helped us, you helped me, now I can help you, and it goes around, right? And this is part of the overall theme of the adventure path, that the actions you as characters take in the adventure path have long-term consequences. When you are good to someone, that makes them more likely to be good, not just to you, but to others in general. That you, me, our characters, we affect the world. When you're a dick, you make the world a shittier place. And when you are a good person who thinks of others before yourself, you help make the world a better place. And that sounds, I know, like a bad Disney movie or something, but underneath all the cynicism of all the cynical characters and all the cynical dialogue and the cynical world that is the Pact Worlds, this is ultimately an optimistic story. It's a lot of people confuse that. You can have an optimistic story told with cynical characters in a cynical world. And that's what this is. So this scene in which the other characters that you've been helping come back and help you, this is a key part to that. Similarly, the final showdown, or I should say the resolution to the whole rival crew plot, the Wintermorn plot, happens in this volume as well. This is a classic example of what a developer's job is, because Leo, who's working on volume 2, is making all of those characters, right? And they appear in volume 3. They don't show up in volume 4 because I don't want you to get too sick of them. They disappear for volume 4, but then they come back in volume 5. And when they come back in volume 5, they have been changed. They have been changed by the actions your characters chose to take. If you have been honorable, good, if you have helped other people without expectation of reward, the crew of the Wintermorn have become more good. But if you have been mercenary, if you have only helped people that can help you, if you have treated NPCs like, as I used to phrase it, like an ATM machine, they're just there to dispense credits for you. Then, or if you have even betrayed people, if you have taken their money and then stabbed them in the back, then the crew of the Wintermorn have become more evil. And your encounter with the Wintermorn in this adventure can be either a positive one where they want to help you, or it can be a negative one where they decide, hey, there's a bounty on your heads and we're going to collect. And this is a very, very different kind of encounter, and it should play out very differently based on the actions and the interactions, the relationships that your player characters have established with one or more crew of the Wintermorn. It's important to note that I don't expect everybody in your player group to like or be interested or even think the characters of the Wintermorn are all that interesting. As a GM, you want to zero in on like the one character of the Wintermorn that the player characters seem to really like or get into. You know, maybe it's Dizzy because she's the first one they meet and she's good. Or maybe it's the captain or the witch warper or the pilot or whatever. Whichever figure, like, don't feel like the player characters have to be into these NPCs. Figure out which one they like the most and then dig into that one and make that character the kind of face for the entire group, the entire crew. Anyway, so Leo is writing up these characters as like level 3, CR3 bad guys or something. And meanwhile, Chris is writing up like level 7 or 8 versions of them for his adventure. And we had to make sure that those two versions were sympathetic, that they fit and meshed. Not to mention all the time that these characters talk in books 2, 3, and 5. And all of their dialogue has to sound like it's the same, like it comes from the same characters, right? It has to be consistent. Well, my authors can't do that because they only see the volume that they have. They only see the volume for the outline that they're given. And they don't know whatever, and everyone's writing them at the same time. So it's not reasonable for me to even expect Chris to write Dizzy with the same language style and vocabulary that Leo wrote her in volume 2. That's my job. That's on me. So I come in and I take Chris's versions of the characters and make sure that it fits with the version that we have in volumes 2 and 3. What else is going on in here? We've been talking a lot. Okay, let's talk about this thing. So this is the Gene Reaver, I think is what we ended up calling it. Chris, this is not Chris's original name for it. Its name was originally a pun on CRISPR technology. But I had to change it because, of course, we don't call it CRISPR technology in Pact Worlds. CRISPR is the gene alteration technique that was developed in the real world, I think, a few years ago. And there's all kinds of fantastic possible applications for it. Ultimately, what we're talking about is a genetic alteration technique. Well, I couldn't call it CRISPR or anything like that, so we had to give it a different name. It turned out pretty interesting, but I want to talk about kind of the challenge here. Alien, the film Alien, might be one of the most influential science fiction movies ever made when it comes to gaming. We are constantly, as developers and as authors, encountering some kind of storyline in which the player characters are hunted by some kind of scary, inscrutable monster, which is usually explicitly in the outline compared to the xenomorph from Alien. I think I had a comparison like that in this outline. I don't remember. And then it's funny because just a few months ago, when I was writing the Starfinder Adventure Path volume for Horizons of the Vast, Keeley wanted me to do another Alien riff with a big swarm creature that hunts the player characters in a damaged starship. This is really hard assignment to do because not only it's hard mechanically and it's hard creatively. There's only so many different ways that you can do a xenomorph, right? Like it's usually really obvious it's a xenomorph riff. And if your players haven't had a lot of experience with that, maybe they can get into it. But Alien is not a new movie, and I'm not sure I ever want to do this again. Like Chris did a fine job with this, and this creature, the Gene Reaver, sort of stalks you through Absalom Station. He gave it a really neat, interesting spin. The Gene Reaver is created from the altered DNA of a particular target. And the Gene Reaver is missing something from its DNA that only the target has. And so the Gene Reaver can kind of smell it and sense it, and it tracks its prey in an effort to make itself whole. It uses that sort of like this bizarre long spine thing that comes out of its hand. And it sucks your DNA into itself as a way to repair the damaged, flawed DNA structure of its own body. Chris's original art description portrayed it as more of a kind of fetus, almost like a walking fetus. And I didn't have that in me. I think we avoid violence against children as an ongoing policy at Paizo, and drawing a monster and having a monstrous fetus who chases you through a space station and tries to kill you was a little bit too close to that borderline for me. But I just de-emphasized the art and didn't emphasize that aspect of it. And it came out fine. It's still a little 3-foot shrunken hunter-killer thing. It's just not explicitly look like a baby. These kinds of... So first off, it's hard creatively because, these Alien ripoffs have been done. And I hate to even use that phrase. It's unfair. It's not fair to Chris, who did a great job with this. But like I say, I myself have written one of these not that long ago. It's just really, it's kind of a worn out trope. I think we need to give it a rest a little bit. So the strange alien xenomorph that stalks you through the starship and attacks you and then escapes and then the challenge. So then our game is not designed for that kind of encounter. Our game is designed for stand-up encounters where you meet like 2 or 3 or 4 creatures, and you usually fight until somebody's defeated. Works poorly for single bad guys in any situation, any kind of single boss monster. This is one of the reasons why whenever we have a big bad guy at the end of a volume, we almost always give him minions, some kind of little guards or somebody that are there, because when it's 4, 5, or 6 players teaming up on one bad guy, you just stun lock him into submission or whatever, or one guy tanks him, and the Vanguard tanks him or something, and it's not really very fun. It's very anticlimactic. Our game does not support the many-on-one fight in a satisfying manner. Secondly, you need the alien, the hunter, the Gene Reaver to get away. Well, that's hard to do sometimes. Player characters have a lot of movement abilities, and players don't like to let creatures get away. Players can be really stubborn about chasing a bad guy as the bad guy flees. And in a film, you can just say, okay, they get away. Like there's a crowd scene, the guy jumps to the other side of a train or whatever, like all kinds of plot things can happen. But in a game, most players find those kinds of instant escapes to be really frustrating and unsatisfying. The players don't like it when that happens. And it's really hard to, and sometimes they'll chase the creature. I've seen this happen. Like, I felt bad for this poor DM. He had this super big bad guy drow, like shows up and attacks the party and then starts to fly away. Well, the party just wouldn't let go of the bone, right? So they just keep attacking that high level drow until finally they kill him. And this happened like 6 sessions faster than that villain was supposed to die. It's challenging. How do you make the fight interesting when it's 5 players against 1 monster? How do you get the monster to get away when you want them to get away? And then they start attacking again later. They have like repeat attacks. Well, how do you do that in a way that players don't just find repetitive and frustrating and boring? Like, oh, it's the xenomorph again. Like, let's just fight it for a couple of rounds and then it'll just get away anyway. And then we don't have to worry about it again. Right? Like they don't even try to defeat it because they know that they're in the plot where the monster attacks and then flees and comes back and attacks you again later. And so they just mark time until it runs away. This is not good for your game table. It's not good. What we did with this one was we tried to suggest that the Gene Reaver kind of hunts the characters and then waits until they're involved in other encounters, and then it jumps in. So it exploits opportunities where the player characters are busy with something. And maybe this will make it more interesting. Maybe the player characters, after the first time, they'll be like, okay, that thing is around. We're going to go jump these 2 spies, these 2 company spies that are after us. But Obadiah, keep an eye out for the Gene Reaver, right? Like maybe that'll work. And then there's kind of a moment in the story where the Gene Reaver sort of makes a final stand once you get to the rust bug. And if you're about to leave the station, the Gene Reaver will lose you, won't be able to follow you. So it kind of has a final point where if you have not yet fought it to the death, you fight it to the death there. Okay. But it's just a really hard thing to do. Our other games solve this in more interesting ways. I mean, a game like Fate or Mutants and Masterminds, for example, can just say, okay, here's a fate point. Or if you're playing Savage Worlds, here's a Benny, the monster gets away. Like it's that simple. It really is that easy. You give the players a physical token, like a hero point or something. And it's your bribe for the monster to get away. And even though that token is very minor and you'll blow it on one reroll, it's a consolation prize. And so you don't mind the creature getting away as much because the creature's escape is now part of the game economy. And you got a fate point out of it, or a hero point, or a Benny or something out of it. Our game doesn't do that. We have no rules for that. So I recommend something like that. Like I really do. Like if the players, if the Gene Reaver is going to get away, or you want it to get away, and the players are like, they want to chase it through the hallways of Absalom Station, which you have no maps for, just give them a hero point and say, how about if I give you a hero point and it gets away? Try it. It might work. While we're talking about the rust bug and art that really worked, I want to touch on art that didn't really work, and that's this. So if you remember, in the rust bug's power core has been infested with electrovores. And the Electrovores have formed a swarm. In game rules, it's a troop. It's a troop of Electrovores. And that was my art order. I asked for a swarming mass of Electrovores, like a king rat, where like they're all kind of like wound and twisted around each other. Instead, we got one Electrovore that was copy pasted 20 times. This is not what I ordered. I made notes, but this is what we get. And unfortunately, there's just nothing you can do about it. Sometimes you have to go to war with the art that you have, not the art that you want. But I don't want anybody to think that I didn't notice, because I did. All right. I have some other topics I want to hit. I want to touch on the topic of feedback, writer feedback here in a minute, and we'll get into that. But I want to make sure I haven't missed anything important in the other sections here. Okay, so we move on to chapter 3. In this part, this is where you take the rust bug and you attempt to crash into, you have to reach Rasora's remote asteroid base. You have broken into Rasora's office and found out there that she has a secret base and what her goal is. Okay, let's talk about Rasora for a minute. Let's get back to the cover. Rasora is an interesting character. She got more interesting the more we worked on the AP. Rasora is she's a follower of the prophecies of Calistrade. And we've talked about the prophecies of Calistrade in previous episodes. I was not too keen on the Callistocrats at first, but the more I got into them and I talked with John Compton, who did a lot of work on them in Pathfinder, the more I kind of warmed to the idea that maybe my antagonists for this working class adventure path was a bunch of people who worship money. And but the Callistocracy, the prophecies of Calistrade, had not really been described in Starfinder yet. We'd had one brief mention in an article on, I think, Cults of the Galaxy, which didn't really do much justice to the organization or the philosophy. And so we had a lot of room to figure out, well, what exactly is Rasora's endgame here? Like, what is she doing? We figured out that, okay, she's been designing this starship. She's been leading this engineering project to make the Oliphant. And the Oliphant has these null space cargo holds, and it can carry twice as much cargo as any other ship of its size, which in Starfinder meant that a medium transport can carry as much as a bulk cruiser, because that's how expansion bays work in Starfinder. Well, okay. So what? Like, how does that relate to her? Well, so now the ship has been stolen, which means Rasora is potentially in a lot of trouble. So we figured out eventually that she's covering this up. As people from higher up in Edge Corp talk to her about, so how's Project Oliphant going? And she's like, all clear here. Nothing to see here. Everything is going just fine. How are you? So she's hidden the theft. She's concealed it. Well, because she knows that this is Edge Corp. This is the company where you get fired by AI, right? Like, they do not give a shit. If you fail to perform, you are canned. Well, Rasora needs the money. Money is very important. In the prophecies of Calistrade, money is what gets you, which is what allows you to avoid being judged. Okay, so this gets into the cosmology of the Pathfinder Starfinder setting. When you die in Starfinder, your spirit goes to the River of Souls and eventually finds its way to Pharasma. And Pharasma judges you, and you get sent to whatever plane best suits your alignment. Well, the prophecies of the followers of the prophecies of Calistrade are all about wealth and accumulating wealth. And if you have to screw people over to get the money, that's fine. Because you, like, when you die, you sort of immortalize yourself as a sort of, you entomb yourself, and your soul never passes on. You never go to the river of souls. You never get judged. And so you can do whatever you want in the world today because there is no afterlife for you. You will not get sent to hell. Or if you're a lawful evil follower of the prophets of Calistrade, well, you can get away with that. You'll never go to hell because you'll entomb yourself in whatever kind of we didn't really know what that was. Like in Starfinder, what do you do? Like, do you digitize yourself? Do you turn yourself into a giant mummy covered in gold? What do you do? Do you build a giant pyramid for yourself and just float through space forever? We eventually decided all of the above, but Rosora's version is the digital upload version. She needs all this money because she's building this kind of like digital repository for herself. And instead of dying, she just continually uploads her memories to this giant simulation. And when she dies, she won't show, her soul will go to this machine and instead of to the river of souls. And so she'll just inhabit her own memories forever. And so she never has to pay cosmically. Karma will never catch up to her. That's her plan. The trouble is that this kind of cutting edge technology, we're talking about using magic to stop your soul from going to the river of souls and being judged, is not cheap. Plus, there's all of the digital storage for your mind. You have to be able to create that VR situation. Like, this is all one of a kind, unique kind of thing, and it's super expensive. So she's been siphoning money off of EdgeCorp to pay for all of this, to basically ensure her own immortality. This is what the prophecies of this is what the Callistrocrats do. They use money to ensure their own immortality and to avoid judgment by Pharasma and to avoid going to one of the planes, to avoid karma effectively. So when the players arrive, okay, so let's talk about that for a minute. The players, first they have a couple of cool encounters. We've got Vesk, Solarian pirate dude, who we will get to. They have a couple of interesting encounters on the way there, but then once they reach Rosora's lair, they have to get onto the station. We built this as a Starship Chase, and this was the encounter that really solidified my love for the Starship Chase rules. Joe Pacini came up with these rules, and I love them because they're so flexible. You define, as the GM, the creator of the Starship Chase, you define victory conditions for the chase. So I could say, okay, we can set up all these like 6 chase rounds. That's another great thing about Starship Chase is that it's bound. It's only got 6 rounds. It can only go on so far, and you play for 6 rounds, and then it's over. Okay, so you play through these 6 rounds. You got all these obstacles in the way. I've got laser turrets and asteroids. But if you can overcome the obstacles, enough of the obstacles, you can crash your starship or land it if you do really well. If you do really well, you land. If you do moderately well, you crash. And if you fail, you have to zip off and try again. You get into the station. So it's kind of like it's not a race at all. It's not a chase. There's nothing, you are not chasing anything. You are trying to dodge the defenses and the asteroid field to get into the docking bay. I mean, that's just a really useful system. So you crash into the docking bay or you land in the docking bay, and then you start running through the station trying to find Rosora and your ship. We didn't have room to map the entire base. It's not like that. Like, we have a set specific encounters that you can avoid or take in various order, but we don't map the entire thing out. But one of those encounters is her big virtual memory hole thing that she's built to store her soul and prevent her from going on, from passing on. We're getting back to the original a question we rose earlier in the episode, which is, how do we make these endings, these two different Volume 5 and Volume 6, how do we make these climactic encounters with villains that you've hated for 4 volumes? How do we make it pay off and feel satisfying and yet also different? So this volume is the hunt and kill volume, where you go through all this effort to finally find Rosora, and you finally face her and you come face to face with her. But you don't actually have to kill her. In fact, we put all these clues in the volume that you can actually steal her money, or at least you can expose her. You can expose her to EdgeCorp as concealing the theft of the Oliphant and as an embezzler who's been stealing money from the company to support her afterlife habit. And if you do this, EdgeCorp will, of course, fire her, and she loses everything. And for a Callistocrat, losing everything is worse than death. Because if she dies, she just goes to the memory machine, right? Like, she's happy in her virtual reality forever as long as the money holds out. But if you can take away her money and shut her down, if you can get her fired, she loses her status. She loses her immortality. She becomes, in other words, ordinary. And to a person like Rosora, that is the biggest possible punishment, is to be ordinary. Rosora changed in between when I first wrote the outline for Chris and when I came to develop the adventure. In between those two things, I got a chance to write a short story from Rosora's point of view. Mark Moreland approached me and asked me if I'd like to write a little short fiction. I think we talked about it in one of the early volumes. I was the one that pitched writing it from Rosora's point of view. I wanted to write the moment where she has her last chance to change. This is an old creative writing class prompt. That is the moment in which Rosora realized that what she was doing was wrong and she didn't have to do it. She could change. She could not do the evil thing, but she doesn't. She chooses to do the evil thing, and she puts her foot on a path that leads her inevitably to this scene in Crash and Burn, when the player characters find her. They've accumulated all the evidence throughout the station that they can now turn over to EdgeCorp and ruin her. And I have this idea that Rosora is not an irredeemable villain. One of the reasons why I wanted to write that story, I think it's called Opportunity Cost. It's posted on the Paizo blog. The reason why I wanted to write that story is to show that she was not always bad. That she had a reason for doing what she was doing. She had been raised a particular way, and she came from a particular background, and she was living in this corporation, which is dysfunctional. And the only way to survive in EdgeCorp is to be dysfunctional. Like, because the company encourages heartlessness and selfishness, it encourages a lack of empathy. People who feel sorry for other people get fired in EdgeCorp, right? Like, it is a heartless, lawful, evil corporation. And so if you want to succeed in it, you have to be lawful evil. You have to be evil. So none of this is to be about an excuse for Rosora. I mean, she clearly has free will. She chooses to do bad things. But I don't think she is without possibility of redemption. And I would love to hear the story about the player character group who spare Rosora. They ruin her career. They take away all of her money. They get her fired by EdgeCorp. They expose her. She takes the blame for everything. And they find her like 2 years later on Absalom Station working in a soup kitchen. Like, that is the story I would tell if this was my AP. So the point was to create a fate worse than death option for Rosora. Now, if you want to just run up to her, punch her in the face, hit her with a shovel and shoot her, you can, right? She's got plenty of guards, and she certainly tries to kill you. But if you want another more interesting, maybe role-playing option, you can do that too. This meant volume 6 that we'll talk about next time had to be different, right? Because it's not a hunt and kill situation. You are not chasing down Sinjin in his base. But because you didn't kill Rasora, we can presume that you kill, that we have a life and death struggle. We have a to the death fight with Sinjin. So I felt that preserved the escalation of tension. Like, if you're going to be in a life or death fight, let's do that at the end. Let's do that in volume 6. But then we had some interesting challenges because we can't do a you hunt him down and shoot him storyline, because we just did that. And we'll talk about that when we get to volume 6. Before we move on, I wanted to very briefly touch on the topic of writer feedback. And I one of the reasons why we delayed a little while with this is because I wanted to reach out to Chris and ask him if I could show, if I could talk about the feedback that he and I exchanged on this AP, and the thought that it might be useful to some of you who want to write for this business to see what feedback looks like. Now, all of us here at Paizo, we all do writer feedback differently. And often we feel like we don't have time to do it at all. I think that when a developer is running short of time, freelancer feedback is one of the first things that gets cut. Well, I'm a professor. Like, giving feedback was basically my job. And there's a lot of people, I think everybody would agree, like, we all feel like it is really important, and yet we also know that we don't have time to do everything. So, decisions get made and things get cut. But I had the opportunity to give Chris specific and actionable feedback, and I wanted to share kind of you guys with what that looks like. I don't know if you can see this. Let's see if I can maybe make this bigger. One second, bear with me. Okay, can you see that? Yes. Okay, let's talk our way through this. This is what I said to Chris after I'd finished development. And you can see from the date that it was basically almost a year ago. In fact, it's almost exactly a year ago. That's crazy. But that tells you how long it takes to make these things and publish them. First off, I was sincerely grateful for all of Chris's work, and I wanted to make sure he knew that. It's a good adventure. A lot of times when we write these things, we get a lot of self-doubt. Like, is my adventure any good? I haven't heard from Tondro in a while. Did he not like it? I like it. And I think people will like it. Also, as a developer, I had to write back and forth to Chris on multiple times with questions. And he was really responsive. He was quick to answer those questions. I think I needed him to resend the maps. They had got lost along the way. I had other stuff I wanted to ask him about so I could clarify. Normally what this is just me trying to figure out what the author intends. What did you mean here? And if I know what you mean, then I can help make that work. I can help make that a reality. But if I'm not sure, if I'm uncertain what you mean, then I have to guess. And I don't want to do that. I want to help make what you want. I want to make your vision a reality. Okay. Feedback is something everybody gets, and it's really important not to take it personal. It's very easy to take it personal, especially if the person you're getting the feedback from is like, somebody like I work with some fantastic people. I've worked with Owen. I worked with, Chris Sims. I work with people that have been James Jacobs, people who have been doing this business for forever. And I revere these people like gods, right? And for them to tell me like something in my adventure didn't work, I can get really depressed about that. Like, this legendary person in my industry thinks I suck. Don't it's not like that. We're trying to help. And don't think that nobody's manuscript is perfect. As a professor, if I said this once, I said it a million times. Like, Mistakes are part of the writing process. Everybody makes mistakes. We all make drafts that they've got goof ups or something in them. And when we work and we fix some of them, but we always miss some. Things always slip through. That's why you've got an author, a developer, and an editor, and a final checks, and everything gets looked at many, many times. And we do that because it slips past one person. Okay. Let's get to some specific. Notice that there's not a lot of specific items. There's like 6 bullet points. And quite frankly, that's like 3 more than I usually do. But they were very specific, and I could talk about, these are very, very specific issues. You know, telling somebody, it's important on feedback to make it specific and what you might call actionable. Like, it's avoid vague things like, your sentences are too long. Well, which sentences did you have in mind? Like, or, like, let's get as specific as possible. Okay. In this case, Chris had there was a lot of skill challenges in the middle of this adventure, the part where you're stranded on Absalom Station. And a lot of those skill challenges involve bonuses or penalties to your various roles. Like, if you did this, you got a -4 penalty. If you did this, you got like a -8 penalty. Okay. This is in our design documents. The math in Starfinder does not work like that. Like, if you're giving somebody a -4 or a -8 penalty, those are just too high. A +1, -1, +2, -2, that's almost always the biggest kind of modifiers we need in this game. A -4, a +4 is the extreme end of what modifier should be. So I just kind of went through, and routinely, I pretty much divided all of the modifiers in half to make the math better for this particular adventure. Speaking of skill challenges, sorry about that problem. Speaking of skill challenges, when you're designing a skill challenge, there can be the trick is to keep it moving quickly and to avoid turning it into some kind of giant die rolling exercise. In this particular case, we had a lot of skill challenges as you're earning the goodwill of all these various people in Absalom Station. There's not a lot of fighting, right? It's more like a role play and problem solving stuff. But we had the situation where, like, okay, everybody rolls 3 times. Well, that's a lot of die rolls, like three die rolls times 4, 5, 6 players. And it just turns into everybody rolling dice for a few minutes. And you just add up all the numbers and it spits out something. This is what we call a die rolling exercise. Like, it's not really fun. It's just a bunch of die rolls, and you don't even really have any kind of agency over it. So instead, let's simplify that system. Make it so that everybody rolls once, and then add narrative or role-playing opportunities in there to flesh out the scene and make it feel interesting and dynamic. This is easier said than done, but this is some of the advice we had. So, for example, that rat rod scene where you're running around the track and like trying to fix things on the track. There's another scene where you go to the Click Clack Club and you're helping out at the club to earn like a place to sleep for the night. Well, rather than making everybody roll 3 times at the Click Clack Club, let's have everybody roll once and then give role-playing scene opportunities for every one of those die rolls. So are you helping to throw the drunk out of the club? Are you fixing the VR game that's busted, right? And give those characters and create, like, role-playing hooks. The players may not use them. The GM might not use them. But if they want to, they can. They could just spend like literally just 5 minutes describing what their character is doing and making that one die roll kind of come to life. Semicolons and colons. Okay. English professor here, okay? But a semicolon is the one that looks like a dot with a comma underneath it. And a colon is 2 dots. These things are not the same, all right? A semicolon is a period. It does everything a period does. On both sides of the semicolon, the two things are a complete sentence. So we went to the track with Rat Rod, semicolon. He helped us find a starship, right? You can't put a colon there. Colons aren't for that. Colons are for lists. Here's the 3 places I went with Rat Rod, colon, the racetrack, the Click Clack Club, and the Starship Docks. I know this sounds really pedantic, okay? And normally I don't get into grammar and stuff, but you got to know what punctuation is for. So there's a lot of great places to learn that. You don't need me to tell you. And this is the only grammar issue that I brought up, but it's a kind of thing. A lot of people, and I pointed it out because a lot of people make this mistake. It's super common, okay? So semicolons and colons are not the same. Solarian mechanics. Okay, so let's talk in our encounter with this guy. What he was not a Solarian originally in the original script. He was like a pirate with some kind of weird cosmic powers he picked up in the drift. And then when we got to the fight with Rosora at the end, she also she had powers like a Solarian, where she had like attunement points, and every round she would accumulate these attunement points and she could use them for a big whammy. Okay, there's 2 problems with this. 3 problems with this. First off, you had 2 bad guys. You had the big boss of the pirates, and you had Rosora, both using Solarian mechanics. That's repetitive, and we don't want to do that. Secondly, you're appropriating Solarian mechanics for characters that aren't Solarians. The whole attunement Zenith Revelation thing, where like I build up attunement points over a number of rounds, and then I burn those things to do a big whammy. That is a Solarian mechanic. And if you want to build something like that into a villain, you can. But don't make it so, don't lift the Solarian mechanics to do it. Make it like, let's not steal a Solarian's thunder. If they're Solarians, if their powers were like a Solarian, then just make them a Solarian, which is in fact what I did with the pirate leader, right? Like, okay, if his powers are based like Solarians, let's just make him a Solarian. Why not? And so that's what we did. And then for Rosora, I changed her powers so they didn't work like that. And we gave her something else instead. The third problem is that NPC Solarians don't work like that anyway. Read Alien Archive, man. Like the Solarian powers, the solar alignment, solar attunement ability, you don't track attunement points for a monster. You roll a die, and every 1 die 3 rounds, they can use a Zenith Revelation. That's it. It's random. They don't build up points. And so, and often I see this, and I'm Chris is watching this, I'm sure. I'm not picking on you, dude. This is a year ago, right? But I bring this up because I've seen it since. This might be a great example of the rule of Owen, which is look it up. Whenever you think that you know how something works in the game, go look it up. Because if we had looked up solar attunement or the NPC ability, we would have seen that they don't use attunement points like PCs do. And this is a record keeping issue. It's just to make it easier to keep track of. So we switched all these powers around, and all of this is just me, like, I just kind of gently reminding that we don't want to duplicate these abilities. If we're going to create new powers, we don't want to just steal a Solarian power system to do it. And third, Solarian creatures don't work that way anyway. Okay. Moving on. Okay, in-character dialogue. Now, sometimes it seems like we don't often have room for this, but I want to clarify that in this case, I think we did. Remember to include some kind of dialogue for new NPCs when you introduce them. It doesn't have to be a lot, like one sentence, sometimes just a few words in quotes to help give the GM an idea for how to role play that NPC. Now, you can tell the GM, this character laughs a lot, or this character makes snide jokes, or whatever. But that is not nearly as good as a quote in which they say y'all or something. Like something that gives the GM a voice for that character. I'm a GM. A lot of you are GMs. And you know that when we don't know how to role play a character, we fall back on like the half a dozen backup voices that we've got like logged back in here somewhere. We've got personality types that we pull out until every city guard sounds the same. Every corporate boss sounds the same. Or we start copying characters from films and television that we like. And it's really embarrassing when players recognize them because I'm like, okay, well, yeah, all right, you got me. Give the GM a few lines of dialogue or a few words of dialogue, anything, so they can quickly get a feel for the voice of that character. And that's often much more useful than narrative text, like which just explains to the GM kind of what's going on and what things and how the character is, how the NPC is acting. So in this case, my specific advice was more in-character dialogue instead of pure narration, right? Give the NPC a single line of dialogue, which goes a long way towards helping the GM portray that character and make that character feel unique. This does not need to be boxed text. A lot of GMs don't like boxed text, and it's problematic in a lot of ways. It does not have to be boxed text. It can just be in the body of the adventure. Okay. Last one. Okay. A lot of GMs can be frustrated novelists, and I say this with love. They write the adventure as if the reader is someone they want to shock and surprise. So let's say you're writing an adventure and the players think that it's they're hunting a big dragon. And the GM thinks it's a dragon hunt. And the cover is like the players fighting a dragon. And the GM reads all the way to the climactic encounter at the end, where we find out that the dragon isn't a real dragon at all. It's like a fake dragon with a bunch of kobolds, like running it from behind the scenes. And the GM doesn't find this out until the last page of the adventure, when the writer tells them, hey, surprise, it's not a dragon. Okay, this is, don't do that. The GM should know all of the surprises from the very beginning. In this case, I don't even remember what it was, but there were a number of sort of moments of this where we'd have the adventure text and it would reveal in like the development section after the fight is over, like the twist. Oh, but this isn't actually what's going on. There's some other thing happening. Let's think of another specific example. Let's say that the Gene Reaver is supposed to show up in this encounter. And so you're doing the encounter and the creatures are showing up and the GM is reading it and they get to the end and they're like, and then the Gene Reaver attacks after the players while the players are distracted. Okay, don't leave that at the end. Put that at the beginning so that the GM knows what's going to happen in this encounter from the very beginning. And if your dragon is actually a bunch of kobolds in a dragon suit, put that on the first page of the adventure, not the last page of the adventure. And now, because the GM should never be surprised. You are not writing to surprise the GM. In this case, let's get to the specific example. Dizzy's desire to hack the company. So we find out in the course of this adventure, when the players are on Absalom Station, they get recruited by Dizzy, who wants to hack the company's database. Why does she want to do this? She doesn't tell the player characters. And so the adventurer doesn't tell the GM until they've finally done it. They get all the way in, they hack the computer, they get the data, and then that's when the adventurer tells the GM why Dizzy wanted to hack it. Don't do that. Move all of that information to the beginning. Explain, this is Dizzy's situation. She wants to hack the computer because one of her relatives has lost his health insurance. And if she can hack into the computer and she can give her uncle health insurance, he can get that heart transplant he's waiting for. But she's afraid to tell anybody this because it makes her look weak in front of her hardened, tough crewmates. Okay. Now the GM can role play Dizzy effectively, right? Make a sense motive check. You get a sense that Dizzy is like acting really tough in front of her crewmates, right? And or a player says, I want to figure out why Dizzy wants to get this information. Like, I want to hack it myself secretly and look at it before I give her the info. All of these things that the players might want to do. And now the GM is prepared and they can answer that. They can respond to it. And because they have all the information that they need. Let the GM surprise the players. Don't surprise the GM. And once again, Chris got all of this. One of the reasons why I could use Chris's feedback is because he was like, yeah, I totally did that. And we could talk about it in a way where everyone's just trying to make everybody's writing better. And so I want to commend, since I have all this list up of all the shit that I told Chris, like what I had to change. This is that Chris responded to this feedback in a super cool, professional manner, right? And I hired him again. After this assignment was over, I had back matter stuff for Horizons of the Vast, and I came back to Chris and I offered him another gig because he was on time, he was great to work with, and he turns in good work, right? So all of this is very normal. We all have feedback. We can all make our work better. And I wanted to kind of dig into some examples of how that feedback happens and what we can learn from it. Okay. Well, folks, that's about it. We have gone for almost an hour and a half now. And I want to thank everybody that stuck with the show when it took me a while to get back to the next episode. We had one last thing I want to address. An audience member wrote into the show and asked, hey, can you help me out with something in volume 1? And the players steal the Oliphant and then they take it to Sinjin, and then Sinjin tries to stab him in the back, and now they've got the Oliphant and now what do they do? And this person was writing, well, listen, wouldn't their friend, their contact at Edge Corp, wouldn't she like urge them to like turn the ship over and because don't the stewards are gonna be after them looking for the starship, and can't we, like, it sounds to me like the logical thing that would happen here is not that the players go off and start using the ship to build their own business, but rather that they would turn the ship over to the stewards or else get arrested. Okay, there's two things going on there. First off, the stewards don't know that the ship is stolen. Rosora covers up the theft. She can't tell anybody the ship's been stolen because then her own failure will be exposed and Edge Corp will can her. She can't let that happen. So she covers up the theft. In fact, later on, she meets the PCs in like the Callistocrat space station, and she still can't say that they've stolen her starship because she's got to keep it secret. Second thing, the helper that the PCs have, who works for Edge Corp, and you are all shouting her name at the screen right now, but I've forgotten it because that's typically what I do. She does not recommend that the PCs turn the ship over to the stewards, even though it is stolen, because what would her friends do then? They have nothing. They've lost their jobs. They lost all the money that they invested that they got from Edge Corp. They have nothing. If they lose the ship, if they give the ship to the stewards, it's not like there's a reward or anything. They're just going to be what? begging for handouts on Absalom Station? No. These characters are not, the first adventure is called We're No Heroes. These characters are not spit and polish, law-abiding people, okay? They've had to struggle to get by. Sometimes they've had to do things that have been shady or outright illegal. I'm not saying they like to hurt and kill people, but they stole this ship for a crime lord. Then the crime lord tried to kill them. They've got away. Well, the ship is hot. Yes, that in the sense that it's stolen. But they stole it from a company that deserves to be stolen from. Like EdgeCorp is bad, okay? And stealing from EdgeCorp should not make anybody feel guilty. Secondly, it's their only way to make a living. If we give the ship back, we have nothing. And so let's keep the ship and use it to pay our bills. This is the kind of decisions that this is the kind of world of gray morality that these characters live in all the time. So that's why they don't turn. Now, your player characters might do that. They might decide, like, no, the ship is stolen. The stewards will be after us. We've got to turn it in. We've got to give it up. Well, in that case, you're going to have a challenge making the rest of the adventure path work. But you can still do it. Like, okay, they're going to have to get a ship somehow. How do they get a ship? Maybe you say there's a reward. Okay, so they give the ship back. EdgeCorp rewards them with something, not a lot. It'll be really cheap. They've got to build a really cheap ship. Maybe they get the Rust Bug. They get some really cheap junker starship, and then they start trying to play through the rest of the adventure path on their own. Well, the adventure path is kind of dependent on the Oliphant, so it doesn't really stick together, but some of it you can still use. They can still go to most of the jobs in Volume 2. They can still help their friend out in Volume 3. They can even try to make the theft in Volume 4. It's not until Volumes 5 and 6, which are really all about getting stealing the Oliphant back and then getting the crime lord. Some of that, they can still go after the crime lord because he still tried to kill him. You might be able to use more of this adventure path than I thought you would, actually, now that you mention it. But it'll be harder because you don't have the cool ship. The cool ship is really cool. Anyway, keep those cards and letters coming in. And we have 2 more episodes left in this series. Next episode, we will address the final chapter of Fly Free or Die, The Gilded Cage, another super hard assignment that was knocked out of the park by my author. And then we'll do a post-adventure path write-up, talking about all of the stuff that we do after the adventure path is over. And then, if you guys like the show, if you would like to, I thought maybe we might look at some of our modules, like Junker's Delight and Liberation of Locus 1, which are self-contained and very different than the modules we've been looking at so far. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you soon. Enjoy your Gen Con.